All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully you've all enjoyed your lunch and got a chance to get some good food in you and maybe get some fresh air, go outside, and get ready for our last session for our traditional healing summit, Culture is Medicine. We are so excited to bring to the stage our next panel, which is Food is Medicine, which is so timely given that we just finished a good lunch and a good meal and had a chance to visit with each other during this time. Our moderator will be Dr. Laura Carroll, who serves as the Senior Policy Advisor for the Human Foods Program at the Food and Drug Administration. And she is going to introduce our distinguished panelists, Zachariah Ben, Nick Hernandez, and Foster Conoyer Hogan. So please help me welcome to the stage Dr. Carroll and the panelists.
Hi, all. Oh, good. Okay. Making sure we don't need to turn anything on for these mics. It is a great pleasure to be here with all of you today. Hopefully, too many of you don't have the after-lunch slump and are really excited about this panel just like I am. So as was mentioned, my name is Laura Carroll. I'm a Senior Policy Advisor at FDA. I've been there for about 6 years now, in federal government for about over 10 now, also working at USDA, always in the nutrition sector. So getting the chance to be moderating this panel about food as medicine is super exciting for me, and honored to have the opportunity. I want to just lay the groundwork before we dive into today's panel and just sort of set the stage a bit. And I think everyone in this room can understand about the access to nutritious food is critical to health as well as resilience. Food as medicine reaffirms that connection and recognizes that access to high-quality nourishment is essential for well-being. HHS recognizes that and actually launched a Food is Medicine initiative at the beginning of this year and has been spending a lot of time focused on supporting those efforts. And by supporting the production of and facilitating access to nutritious food across a health continuum and range of settings, approaches to food as medicine support immediate as well as long-term resources for people, communities, and systems. It encompasses a broad range of approaches that promote optimal health as well as healing and reduce disease burden by providing those nutritious foods. It can come in a lot of different forms. Food as medicine is a very broad concept, so it can look like produce prescriptions, but it also can be human services, education, and policy change, and collaboration is often at the core of all of that work. So this is a pivotal time to be talking about food as medicine in our country, where the U.S. is now leading in having the lowest life expectancy for large, high-income countries. And many underserved communities are experiencing the greatest burden of those diet-related diseases, including American Indians and Alaska Natives facing some of the highest rates of diet-related diseases. So these populations continue to face barriers to accessing healthy traditional foods and improving food sovereignty. So we're excited to have the opportunity to talk about how to make some changes and find solutions in that space. So I'll have all of the panelists introduce themselves, starting with Zachariah right here on my right.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. She Zachariah Ben Inishya. Yeah, Itina Anashla. Ozay Touchini Bashashin, Kitlachini Dashache, Ashe and Dashnala, Akut Al Dana Anashla. I was born and raised in Shiprock, New Mexico. I am a 6th-generation farmer. I am also the owner and co-founder of Biddy Baby Foods. We're one of the first indigenous baby food lines ever created here in the United States. And we specialize in producing organic, chemical-free, non-GMO, heirloom-produced baby food out of the Navajo Nation.
Nick?
Abeti washte, waoke mani machapi, chante washte pe chuza pillow. Good afternoon, relatives, friends. My name is Nick Hernandez. I'm the president and CEO of Makoche Agriculture Development. We are a place-based nonprofit organization based on the Pioneer Indian Reservation. I'm a tribal member of the Oglala Sioux tribe. Happy to be here today to talk about food as medicine. I have a nonprofit organization focusing on 5 strategic initiatives, from developing a multi-purpose community food hub, regenerative production farm, hemp development initiative, Food Systems Institute, and then alliance work that advocates for policy change within my community. Happy to be here today.
And last but not least, Foster.
Madakiapi Foster Kunar Hogan Hamachiapi Sichangu Lakota Hamacha Naha Unshinshinka Wakpala Elwati Naha Intertribal Buffalo Council Wawashi Achamu Naha Traditional Ecological Knowledge Specialist Hamacha. Hello, my relatives. My name is Foster Kunar Hogan. I'm Sichangu Lakota from the Rosebud Reservation. I work at the Intertribal Buffalo Council as the Traditional Ecological Knowledge Specialist.
Awesome. Thank you all for being here today. So as I was saying at the beginning, food as medicine really is a broad concept. So I'm curious for all of you to touch a little bit on what does food as medicine mean to you?
This is one of my favorite questions. For me, as a 5-fingered being between Nahastan and Yadilkil, between Mother Earth and Father Sky, being able to steward the land, understand that relationship, and bring that to life, of being able to foster that type of life through the corn crops that we have, and being able to plant those seeds and use that water and those natural resources to create these first foods. And understanding that relationship really helped me to synchronize myself with nature, nature's aesthetics. Being able to be in those cornfields in the early dawn morning and see those deities come across the cornfield. And that in itself is fulfillment. That in itself is healing. And that healing happened within myself. To be able to navigate a lot of the aces that I went through at a young childhood on the reservation and come out of that to create positive childhood experiences for my children, to break those cycles of trauma, to break those cycles of systemic issues, and being able to create advantages and opportunity for my children by building generational wealth with the knowledge of traditional farming, the knowledge of creating a business that can serve your community, and being able to, in a way, see all of that evidence within our son. As parents, as farmers, it's fulfilling, it's beautiful, it's magical, and seeing our son as a first human case study. It's amazing to see that and create that space for him to thrive in, and our children to thrive in, and a space where our community can come onto the farm and experience that alongside of us, to promote that healing and use that farm to also create these moments of healing using the corn pollen, for example. And so those examples head into preventative care, preventative measures. So those health benefits, we're able to take that in, and so that way we're not having to deal with health elements related to food, related to social disadvantages down the road where we're having to invest into treatment. No, we're making those investments early on now, from prenatal to 5-year-old children, and that's our primary focus. So that way these children can prefer these first foods. These children can prefer those types of health benefits. So that way we can make those investments where instead of treating them, we're making those investments for a stronger community down the road. And some real life examples of that is working with our local IHS pediatric ward, where we're able to get these baby foods into that ward and serve 6-month children. And there's appointments, and being able to use those systems to serve our children, to serve our communities in that way, and promote more healing using these first foods. So it's been a wonderful experience, and it's amazing to see how far food has come, and how we're able to continue that using ancestral knowledge and mixing that with modern day systems. Thank you.
I mean, yeah, such a broad term. But food, my definition of as food as a medicine is within the terms, right? Because we're talking about, Western concepts of understanding that is more grounded in native connection, indigenous connection to these foods. And so the one thing that we have that basically grounds us and that stems from the earth is our language, um, Prajuta Oyute, so sacred medicines. And food as medicine to us was the understanding and the connection of and the relationship we had with our environment, with our relatives, because our origins of who we are as common people relates to our connections back to the environment, back to the ecosystems, back to for me of Great Plains, having a connection to our buffalo relatives that that we honor, that we've created relations with, to be able to live in this world, right? In this world as an organic being. And so food as a medicine is having that connection, having that opportunity to have that connection, and to be able to understand the relationship, the history of food, the origin of that connection, and to view it as medicine, right? Is those are also different things. Those are also different levels of understanding, because one of the modern influences of medicine, right, is understanding that willow, right, our aspirin and everything comes from certain plants, but it's being able to understand, right, that relationship by eating those things, by rubbing your hands on those, by absorbing the soils and through the smells and the taste and the feel and what that brings to you, right? That's the movement, that's the energy for what we absorb when it rains, to the beauty of the flowers. And so it's not a majestic relationship. Food is medicine. It's something that we need to understand in this as humans today, because it's something we've been disconnected for, and especially within indigenous communities, we've been disconnected from our food, from our medicine for multiple generations, for multiple centuries, and we can come all the way back here, to the East Coast of over 500 years. And so to be able to understand the broad question of what that is means to understand your relationship back with the land, back with the water, back with the soil, from what Tui and Lexi and Ryan up here were talking about. And so our understanding of food as medicine is being able to have access to that, share that knowledge, come to the table, and to be able to learn, from those teachings and from those guidances that a large majority have been able to learn from creating that privilege and sharing those stories.
I think the concept of food as medicine is a lifelong teaching. It's something that can't be grasped, especially given the circumstances we face today. But I think thinking food as medicine, immediately I think surface level of the nutritional benefits of different foods. But I think coming from a cultural perspective and standpoint, in the Lakota language, we have a word called wichozani, which means health. And if you break that word down, you get wicho, zani. Zani is to be healthy, but when you add wicho in front of it, it's the health of a person, the health of a being. And even breaking that down into further, you get zani turns into ni. That ni is the essence of life. So what does it mean to really be healthy? It means to take care of yourself so you may have a good life. And we see that in the plants and the animals, aside from the nutritional facts that we know today. And so coming from another cultural perspective, when we go out and forage our traditional foods or harvest buffalo meat, deer meat, or even gardening from the agriculture tribes, there's medicine and healing in the process of doing those activities. It's one thing to go out and enjoy the sunlight, be out in nature and ground yourself in prayer to gather your foods, to nourish yourself and your family at the table. So I think that it's multifaceted concept is what I'm trying to get at, because it really is more than just eat your fruits and vegetables so you can be big and strong. I'm sure we've all heard that. But, you know, it really is the essence in that process of going out and knowing where your food comes from and its significance and the cultural and spiritual value in it as well, especially if it comes from, you know, your ancestral homelands or your treaty territories. You know exactly what that food is that you're consuming.
Thank you all for that. Consistently across all of what you were talking about, it is very obvious that food is not just something we consume, right? It is a part of our culture. It's part of our community. Foster, I know last week when we got the chance to connect, you talked about how food can also be part of language revitalization. And curious if maybe we can start with you, Foster, on that point, but curious on how all of you can talk a little bit more about the connection between food and culture, and then why it's so important to be doing this work right now.
Yeah, of course. And I thought about this, and I wrote something down that my Lexi Leland, little dog, my uncle, he taught me. He knows I'm very passionate about food. And so we talk about language and, just like I said previously, breaking down words. And you might have heard from the previous panelists that are Lakota and Dakota, to express gratitude, we say pilamaya or pidamaya. And that word comes from ipilaya. And breaking that down even more is EP. And when you're satisfied after eating, you say imapi. That means I'm full. So, and over time, that word has changed from expressing gratitude to I'm full. And that's the first thing that you do when someone comes to you, you feed them. So when you're saying pilamaya and expressing gratitude, you're saying, I am full, so I'm grateful. I get to live another day because I have nourishment. And that's a very interesting concept, I think, because it goes back to, again, that essence of life is what we put into our bodies and what we consume. And personally, for myself, I love to forage. I love to learn about our traditional plants and consuming buffalo and learning all the traditional practices of buffalo. And with my experience learning the Lakota language, I learned a lot about the plants by its Lakota term, more so than the English term, because those plant relatives, they yearn for that. They yearn to be called what we used to call them forever versus what we call them now. And so just speaking those words out to them in our language, they hear that, and they have that spiritual connection to flourish in their own way, beyond our own understanding. And same goes for food. We always pray for food. Before our ceremonies, we always offered food to those on the other side. Not just to bless it, but to just, again, give that gratitude. And so there's a lot of different ways that you go about in learning the language. And I think because we always had food prior to contact, everything revolved around food. Who's going to go get the food? Who's going to go hunt? Who's going to build the fire to cook the food? It always revolved around food. And so the essence of our language revolves around that as well. And there's so many different ways to say one thing. Even in today's times, you talk about Brussels sprouts, for an example, something we've never had before. But the way it's described, it's talking about the round balls that grow around the stem, if you've ever seen a Brussels sprout grown. So it's very descriptive in observations in our senses of how we view food. So just a quick example of language of how we use it when we view food.
I feel that language, within understanding food is something that's foundational, and just like he pointed out, it's understanding the words for which are descriptive in talking about certain things, because in in the language we speak, in the English we speak, it's a backwards language, but it's a straight language that's easy to somewhat understand. But once you speak a descriptive language like our native tongue, you start to realize that it's more than just a word. It's being descriptive about what those animals, what those plants, what those soils are actually doing at that time. And for incorporating language into our work, and especially for like the title of my organization, Makoche, homelands, right? Understanding that my focus is on the homelands and all that it encompasses, the entire ecosystem, all the way down to the relationship to the soil. But when we talk about food in Lakota, Woyute, when you break down the terminology of these words to talk about something, it's descriptive, meaning everyone partakes. That's what that actual word means. And my Lekshi, Richard Two Dogs, described the use of food within our culture, because food is also a foundation. It sets the table. It sets the table for our entire culture, and that's how we make relationships. That's how we made peace. That's how we made relatives. That's how we made prayers. I mean, we still do, not made. That's how we do those things, by offering foods, by being inviting to our homes. We offer food, right? And that's the healing part of it, is making those relationships, and doing this work also, and especially experiencing the process of doing something like harvesting fruits, berries, roots, but also our native meats, and sharing those, especially with multiple generations and our elders. We open up a door to them that they haven't experienced, or even ourselves, that we haven't experienced since we were children, of a younger generation. And so to involve language involves a description or a time, right, that we've lived, and it opens up a whole new door that we've probably closed, or that was closed for us. And so language is very powerful, and we know that across the board, based on proposals, based on narratives, based on storytelling. And so for us, it's something, and I speak for the work that we do. We utilize our Lakota language in all opportunities that we engage in, and so it's something that we pride ourselves on in being able to bring back our reconnection through the language and through our work.
Yeah, I love this part about it, because growing up, Diné was my first language, but I lost it when I went to public school. And so growing up on the farm, we'd always have that interaction between ourselves and the corn, and understanding that, and growing up nurturing that corn. So when you fast forward now, and we're pregnant, and we're starting, this bitty baby foods. What are we? As people, we're hungry, right? We're always yearning for something, always striving for something, and we were thinking, what can we make this business about? And it's food, it's for our babies, and incorporating the language into that process has been challenging in terms of getting it certified and all that good stuff. But we started to ourselves, like, we're Biddy. So Biddy in Navajo is bid. Bid is your stomach when it protrudes out. And so coming from a wealth mindset from back then, when you saw somebody that's Biddy, and you knew that they had a rounded stomach, and so they took care of themselves. They knew how to forage, they knew how to farm, they knew how to hunt. And for that, they were Biddy, they were rich. And that's somebody that can take care of my family. And I would want to, I want somebody like that to support me. and create a family with that person. And so biddy also nowadays has turned into a slang. So when you see somebody going for seconds or thirds at the barbecue, it's like, gosh, you're all biddy. And so, you just love food. And, and that's what we wanted to incorporate immediately in the beginning was how can we have that language a part of who we are? And, the foundational parts of ourselves as parents was birth. Being able to take those necessary steps as mom and dad to create a birth environment, to start the cradle board, build that out, make that, do the procedures that go into it to make those offerings to the sapling, the tree sapling that you're going to be harvesting to create this physical safe sleep device that will help your child co-sleep with you, to help your child breastfeed, to help your child witness what you're doing in life. And being able to have that birth there immediately and have those birth songs sung and, hearing that, having our child hear that prenatally, then that transition into the world. And now we get to, in our first couple weeks of life before the child starts to laugh, it's the deities see that child as theirs still. So they watch over that child, and if they don't laugh, then they take that child back because that child is not being taken care of. But when that child laughs, then that confirms with the deities that that child belongs, that child is happy, that child is cared for, and they're being fed well. And so with that, in celebration, we have ceremonies around that. And so language is a part of all of those areas of growth. And it's amazing to hear, the word of, the essence of health and how, as Foster described, how descriptive our language is. And if you don't know that, then you don't have a culture. If you don't have the language, you don't have a culture, you don't have song, you don't have prayer, you don't have that connection to these beings of the earth that walk among us. And that's something that was taught to me very early on was, when you see nanset, when you see the plants, when you see the eltani, the bugs of those plants, then, you're able to talk to them using that language. And as humans, we become very separated from that. We think we're better. We think we're better than all of that because we stand and when we're supposed to above them, then steward them. But in our creation stories, as Navajo people, the language didn't belong to us first. It was taught to us when we were created. Who spoke before us was the beings that resided here before us. It was the bugs, the plants, air, water, land, sky. They spoke that language before they taught it to us as beings that have 5 fingers and walk on two feet and among the people that were here before us. And so, we become very ignorant to that. And, that's what I love about taking this journey with my family is being able to show them that. Show them those healthy environments so they can thrive in that and use the language to help guide them among those processes.
Nick, I really liked how you said very succinctly that language is very powerful, and I think sometimes we forget about that sometimes, and so it is helpful to have that conversation again about why it's so important, and each word we choose and the way we describe things is so influential. I want to go back to, Zachariah, you were talking in your first response about talking about what food as medicine means to you. You brought in the concept a little bit about modern society and tying it back with ancestral knowledge. And, FDA, along with all of HHS, we really focus on science, right? That is what drives a lot of our decisions. And so I'm curious on how you can talk a little bit about marrying modern science with ancestral knowledge and how you all approach that in the work you do.
Yeah, I think I could start it off simply that when you don't know, you fear it. And, when my dad taught me that at a very young age through art, and art that would fight with science, because science, you're proving something. You're proving that this works with this formula and creates this. So why isn't it proved when it proves through what you live? And what I mean by that is, when we are out there in the cornfields and we're working the corn, there's a lot of depleted folks that come to the farm. Folks that are diagnosed with different conditions, whether it be digestive related, mental, spiritual. They get these diagnostics, they come to the farm, and they don't tell us these things before, they just tell us afterwards when their battery gets recharged. And so through these processes, we're able to ritualize what we do in prayer, as Foster had mentioned earlier. When you establish that connection, you pray to it, you ritualize it. So when we ritualize that nature, then we go through that ancestral knowledge. You create a methodology, you create a process that goes into creating these traditional foods where you go through a value-added process. The value add is those spiritual components, where we're able to cook it underground using trees. And you think firewood is firewood, right? But there are rings in the firewood that represents a cycle where the sun started and ended. And that's a ring, that's a year in these tree trunks. So you release the power of the sun. That energy is transferred into this food, this corn that's growing, or that's corn that's being cooked underground. There's that transfer that happens. So then you eat that, you consume that energy. You consume those cycles of energy of the sun. You consume the cycles of energy through the photosynthesis of these plants that went through creating this life to create this seed that can either be planted or turned into food. And that's our consumption. But when you ritualize it, then you add in the spiritual parts of it, where you're able to sing those planting songs, where you're able to sing those growing songs and have your children interact with the corn. And youth is a very huge natural resource that we look over a lot of times and don't consider. And we have that a part of our process where we're able to create these organic crops using heirloom seeds. And from there, now that I've explained the methodology, it's you cannot industrialize or commercialize that process. And that's what helps us to aggregate a lot of other producers in our area, create opportunity for other young farmers who are able to, where it is able to help us guide into different areas of growth. Really good prime example is what Nick is doing in the work that he's doing in his tribe of creating a commercial kitchen and a food hub. And those are things that we've seen that's highly needed to be able to get those certifications in place, to be able to become farm to school certified, farm to institution, to be able to have us certified so we can serve IHS, be a part of the pediatric ward so we can distribute our baby food products out there, being able to make those connections from farm to food banks so we can target our demographic of 0 to 5-year-old children, and being able to have them consume what we're growing there on the farm. That's being able to mix the modern science, modern infrastructure and systems with ancestral knowledge and create those solutions to be able to get our people their healing food, to get the people to be a part of that process and heal together as a community, as it was intended for being a bilashklai, a five-fingered person.
Nick or Foster, anything you want to add on there?
Yeah, I can go. I thought Nick was going to say something. I think one thing to really recognize is that ancestral knowledge is science, but it's just the way that it's measured today makes it modern science. And so to put it in layman's terms, you know, you got to recognize real. You have to understand that we knew, you know, centuries worth of knowledge that's being used today. Like Nick said, the ingredient that makes aspirin is within our natural plants, as are a lot of prescribed medicines. And so really recognizing and understanding that what we use today, majority, if not all of it, comes from Indigenous peoples' teachings. And so I think a big part of that is, one, recognizing it, but then also giving the recognition to the Indigenous peoples and the lands from which those things come from. It's okay, like how Zach said, it's okay to not know everything. There doesn't have to be an answer for everything. There's some things that just need to remain unknown, and that is okay.
I think well, I think we all experience we don't know things at all times. We don't always like to admit it. That's part of the problem, right? But speaking a little bit about, talking about, being able to serve Indigenous foods in schools or other institutions and really making that connection that ancestral knowledge is modern science. So how do we convince people of that? How do we build more trust with, our federal government on, relying on Indigenous knowledge?
There's a lot of evidence out there that already proves that, the first 3 years of life are critical for the environment that children are growing up in and their consumption. What does that nutrition look like? And basically the intake. And so with that, we believe that, and why we went down the baby food route was to be able to help that evidence further alongside with our traditional foods, those first foods. And that was, helping these studies get proven by using our own traditional foods, by creating new research around, like our son, but around being able to mold their palates to prefer first foods and how that is important to their consumption, because that is their heritage. That is who they are, to be able to intake corn much easier than they would rice. And, being able to create those differences, but also have them tailored to the communities that they are in. And so, with those general areas of providing for our children, we like to, generalize that type of care when, we're different. That's a fact. We're different. And when I say Bila Ashkla'i, it's the people that, again, roam on the earth, but, what grows on the other side on the back side of Mother Earth doesn't grow quite well on this side of Mother Earth, but we can still eat it, but our genes won't be able to suck out those nutritions as easy it would have been if we were on that side, right? So, that's what I feel like that evidence proves, that, that's why these first foods are important, and being able to introduce that systemically to our cafeterias, our ability to serve within food banks, be a part of those systems and become certified to, create those experiences and heal our communities in that way, to be able to take in those full, we can make all the nutrient-dense food that we can, but it's our bodies that will be judging the intake of that. Yeah. And so, building those relationships is, going through for ourselves to get into those spaces is getting the nutrient analysis done, getting our first foods onto the National School Lunch Menu, working with and contracting with a registered dietitian. For us, she's Navajo, and we contract with her to be able to get our nutrient analysis, get our labeling, nutritional labels done, and show the federal government, look, we're willing to work with you, and how are you willing to work with us? And so with that, those conversations start. Okay, well, your packaging has to be in all English. No. Can we have it predominantly Navajo first? Yes. Okay, well, we'll still include English, but it'll be on the bottom, but you still have to accept that working in that manner, to be able to have our language included on the packaging, on the labeling in itself, to promote revitalization of language, and being able to create that connection immediately when the people describe the food in Navajo, then they're understanding it. It's descriptive to not only the way they say it, but descriptive to their spirit to intake. And from the recipe development to being able to handhold, to be able to help guide them as well. I say them as in the feds, the school districts, the state, to be able to help hand guide them into these areas of recipe development and inclusion, where we work alongside them, where we did a survey within our local school district, and kids preferred their cultural foods over what they were being served from Cisco, right? And so with that ability, with that understanding, it created a huge demand that we're not able to fulfill now. So now we got to get more producers involved. Now we got to get more young farmers involved so they can continue those efforts into certification, the types of crops that they want to go into, and that's building those relationships, building up the system, and having that access for all. And that's where that trust will then work itself out naturally.
Anything you two want to? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, what we're doing at Makoche, to the fact, right, of bringing our food back into our communities is based on the strategies, right, the initiatives, the specific initiatives that we're developing. Being able to create a multi-purpose community food hub, not only for the multiple functions within our community, but to be able to create to develop a commercial kitchen that brings in the community, right? That sets a space to be able to learn about, to be able to learn how to process and package and store foods. But as I navigate through this life, and especially I have two sons. I have a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old. To be able to create the experiences for them to learn about where food actually comes from, right? Because that's kind of where we all started out. What is food? Where does it come from? Because right now we're totally disconnected from our food system. We can build all the schools that we want, we can create all the programs that we want, but unless we, right, as the humans, as a general population, understand where their food comes from, then we start to become that disconnected generation, because that's everything that deals with science, right? The genetic makeup of food, right? The nutrition that is needed, right, to fill our bodies. But for us, it's a totally different genetic makeup based on environment. And what we're doing is we're creating this whole line of food, right, that's designed for everybody to intake, but we're missing out on the ecosystems. We're missing out on the actual connection of where that food comes from. If we're consuming bananas from some island and pineapple, and we're eating beef from South America, that's not healthy. That's not healthy. And so for us, what we want to go back to is understanding the connection to food, raising that food, and for the community to be involved. Of raising those or harvesting those, but also processing. So being able to create kitchens, storage facilities, understand what actually drying foods looks like, and then understanding the science related to that. And it's more than just the nutritional content, it's actually understanding when to pick those foods, when to harvest those animals, right? Because there's specific times when you do that, because you have to be mindful and take into considerations the cycles of life, right? We don't understand those cycles of life, especially on the more natural realm. And so for us in Makoche, we make sure and value that connection by offering classes, by offering trainings, and they're tied to the shared knowledge, from our generations, and even to our youngest generation. My youngest son, he's 8 years old, but he's been harvesting since he was 5 years old. If I were to trust anybody with a knife, it's my 8-year-old son, to be able to take off the hide of a buffalo, right? It's that teaching that generationally and historically was taught to our kids, and that created that connection to the food. And one of the stories I had is that I think we were having a steak or something like that, and he was 5 years old. And the first question he asked me when I put this food in front of him is this buffalo? Is this tatanka? And I said, no, it's not. It's beef. And he's like, well, I don't know what that is because I grew up on buffalo. And so I introduced a new food to him, but he had no connection to what that actually is because he grew up on buffalo meat because that's what we value. You know, that's more of our traditional food. And so he had already had an acquired taste, right? And that's what we're missing is actually the taste of food, the way it makes you feel, right? And for food, coming from all the way up to the soil to where it's processed to where it transforms, a different energy, because that's what science is, right? It's taking a different energy and transforming it into something else. And he understands that, you know. At 5 years old, he understood that. And that's the mind-blowing part, right? Us are set in our ways as adults. And I really hate working with adults, I'm going to be real. Because we're set in our ways, right? We're set on a mono focus of what we believe. But to kids, when we interact, when we engage, when we put them out in nature, they see things that totally different, right? They're like that puppy with that prances around you, right? With big eyes, that's looking for the next big thing. Our kids are like that because they're open, they're energized to new things, but also they're absorbing the energy that's around them. And so I really value the value of traditional foods within a multiple of systems that benefits us culturally, because that's actually our culture. That's our food. And it's not something we want to commercialize, you know, to a sense that it's for everybody. We're actually focusing on local food systems, right? Food systems that are relevant to that area, because we're not trying to create a banana to ship 5,000 miles away. We're engaging with those berries, right, that have a nutrition density, that have a value within that ecosystem, and a relationship that we've been able to create for millennia. But it's that connection and being able to tell those stories and share those with a multiple of generations from my son, and then creating those jams and jellies and share those with my elders, and then they open up, you know, a whole new experience that didn't come from an institution, didn't come from the four walls, right? It came from the relationship we have with this food and the experience of sharing that, you know, as a community. And it opens up a multiple of things: language, culture, connectivity, community, family experiences. And so to be able to bring that into our schools where, you know, a large majority of our students are at 8 hours a day, they want that. And we know they want that. We just have to support that and make that an opportunity, because there lies your next scientist. There lies your next cook, your chef, your organizational leader, right? Because what we miss through all of what we're missing, and I'm speaking to a choir, is that the passion, right? We got to create that passion toward the experiences that we have the opportunity to be involved in, and our kids are looking for that. And it's different now. It's different in this generation. Our kids are growing. They're more insightful. They want to be a part of things, and being able, for us, being passionate about that, to create those experiences for this generation is something that we value more, because that's what we want to do. We want to create something different than what we had growing up.
Well, we were talking about actually building trust with government and supporting indigenous knowledge, but there's so many other points too that have been brought up along the way that you know, the tug and pull on commercialization, right? That is like we do live in a modern society that really does value that, but maybe that's not always the best solution. And but you're also talking a lot about, you both talked about youth here, right? And that they are the future of our country. They're the next generation. And so how are you working with youth? Maybe we can turn to talking about that a little bit. And obviously you can jump in on any of the other points that were made, but would love to hear a little bit more about bringing in youth into the work that you are doing.
Yeah, I can go. I'll touch up on the previous question just a little bit, but I think what federal agencies can do is really prioritize the memorandum that the Biden administration put out of integrating indigenous knowledges into their decision-making process. I think that's a crucial first step. And then recognizing when you hear the word tribe or tribal nation, you automatically think of the council or governing body, right? Well, there's multiple layers, like ourselves here, working for a tribal chartered entity or a tribal nonprofit. There's so many different layers that really are working on the ground to do the work for the betterment of our tribal nations. And so I think that's one route to take to really work with tribal nations and tribal citizens as well. And just really trusting that in order for us to have indigenous knowledge or traditional ecological knowledge, we need to have our access to our ancestral homelands and honoring the treaties, right? Because without land, we can't have buffalo. Without buffalo, we can't have our native species, or even down south, they need land so they can grow their agricultural crops, right? So another little spiel there. And then the youth engagement part, what the Intertribal Buffalo Council does is we have multiple cohort apprenticeships for youth from middle school to high school age level, and they're out understanding what it takes to manage buffalo effectively and efficiently. But then what we're also starting to do is we have a mobile harvest trailer that we take into tribal nations, into their communities, and relearning the art or the practice of harvesting buffalo, understanding the different parts from all the multiple cultures that are Buffalo Nation. And that's one way. And then personally, again, going back to the language component, understanding the different parts of the buffalo that are being able to identify it in the Lakota language, and then being able to use, everyone wants the prime cuts, right? Everyone wants a backstrap or tomahawk steak, but really understanding that the not so choice cuts like the tongue, the tail, even the genitalia, using those parts as well. So really reducing waste when harvesting and trying to break the stigma or the bias that you can only eat prime cuts. Thank you.
What we do at Momokoche for the youth is that, like I said, we're really grounded on creating community opportunities, especially for the youth. One of the things that we're working on, and I gleaned from the National Park Service as another program. Last year we went to, me and my family and my boys went to the Tetons in Yellowstone, and they participated in the Junior Ranger program, right? It was this curricula that you had to participate, and it taught you about the ecosystems of the area that you were visiting. It talked about plants, it talked about the animals, and I really liked it because it was engaging, not only for my kids, but as a family, we engaged in this activity of learning about the ecosystems and the animals and the landscape, and we brought that idea home. We took that curricula and we developed our own, and it expanded. And I gave it to one of my youth at the time. She was a high school senior, and she was one of my interns. And I said, I got an idea. I got a plan. I got this Junior Ranger curricula. Right? I want you to take this, but create our own activities, be able to tell our own story, be able to talk about our own environments, and be able to create something, right, that benefits the good, but that benefits our community, understanding the oasis that we live in, right? Because a lot of our homelands have been deemed, and especially by the federal government, right, as badlands, as deserts, right? But as a community, we're very fond and we're very loving to our land, right? Because that's where we come from. And I said, I want to create this document so then that we can create something for multiple generations, but also for those who come and visit, right? And to come and visit and have something they can take back home and be able to share and learn from, because it is about sharing and learning. And so we've, with my intern, she's a 17-year-old dual language learner, certified teacher at 17 years of age, took this curricula and developed a 30-page document in less than 60 days. And we're looking to get funding to get it printed and put out in our community and use as a piece of narrative and information and true history, but also true relationships to our community. And so things like that, right? That's very powerful, because we're not only talking about the things that we're doing. We actually want to develop these things to share out with our community, but be able to create a model, right? A model and a system that we can share out with all of our relatives all over, because everybody is looking for the ideas, systems, and solutions that benefit their community. And so that's one great story, on top of, being able to share the experience with my 8-year-old son now, 8-year-old son and he looks forward to harvest every year. We just did a deer harvest a couple weeks ago, and I kept him from school, because he asked, he's like, "Are we doing deer harvest this week?" And I said, "Yep." So I said, "You want to go to school?" He said, "No, I'm going to stay home from 2nd grade, and we're going to harvest a deer." And that's all we did all day. But it's that relationship, it's that opportunity, right? That is more than just what you get out of a book and sitting in a classroom for 70 days. It's a total experience, but it's also a bonding experience, right? That is more valuable than anything, and our kids are hungry for those experiences. And so I can talk about all the way from an 8-year-old to a 17-year-old and creating those opportunities and getting things done that they want to create and be able to tell their own stories. And that's a table I always want to set for our younger generations is, here's an opportunity, here's a table, here's some funding. What can you think of, and let's create it. And I support that. Like I said, I fully support any opportunity for the youth. I'm very leery of adults because we're set in our ways. But if you're supportive and we find that opportunity, then let's make the youth, let's let the youth create that change for the communities.
Do you want to add anything on?
Yeah, I think for the way that we engage youth is through our Farmer in Residence program, where we're able to help them establish their own farmland, where they get an access of 1 to 2 acres, and they get the option and opportunity to establish their own farm brand, where they can build up the economic status there within the reservation, or if they want to supply the brand. And using that fiscal sponsorship opportunity of having the nonprofit alongside the for-profit hybrid business model to create those types of opportunities for our youth. And having that self-healing, that self-health will help them to create prosperity and being able to address systemic change or opportunity within their localized systems, and being able to heal, most importantly. And that's what I feel like really brings up the social determinants of health within our areas, is starting with the youth. And as a parent, there's that saying that goes is, your child is a product of their environment. And so for us as parents, we were able to change that for our children, our immediate children, and understand that and build that into a formal curriculum, and then start teaching that.
Gives me lots of hope for the future of our country whenever we talk about youth. I know we are just at the tail end of our panel, and so I always like to wrap things up with some optimism, things that people can do. So would love to give each of you 10 seconds, since I'm about to be over time already, on what is your call to action for this audience today? What can they do when they go home to their community and how can we keep everybody motivated? This is hard work.
I'll go first. I think something that I've said before, and I think I still like to follow it to this day, But for federal agencies, consultation is not enough. You need to do actual collaboration with tribal nations and tribal citizens. Sending an email out or attempting to call an office is not consultation. That's the bare minimum. You need to do more than that for the betterment of tribal nations, but also for the betterment of the country as a whole. Because regardless, we're still on tribal lands. And we're all dual citizens at the end of the day. Tribal nation citizens first, but also citizens of the United States as well. And so I think just really prioritizing how you work with tribal nations and tribal citizens and tribal organizations and nonprofits.
Good. I'm always going to follow him on that last part. But no, I mean, the call to action is to support, financially, to create these programs, especially around youth programs, around these opportunities that don't really, have a lot of funding to go behind it. But funding that actually we're focusing on, right? Creating systemic change within our communities and developing, the policies that benefit us more, right? Because our food systems is what we want to have control of. And across the board, we don't have control over our food systems. And we've experienced that through the pandemics, through the ups and downs of GDPs and whatever else, I'm not, but it's being able to support the opportunities that we are creating. And these are different, these are aligned, these are woven movements that we are creating, but also these are historical obligations due to treaties that also need to be honored and understood, because we're talking about things that that already should be created, and that we're trying to rebuild 200, 500 years already in the making. And so being able to understand those things and helping and supporting us to develop the verbiage, the language, the teachings that we can pass on to the next generation, and that's my call to action. And coming out and visit, I think FSII, what's his name, Director Kiker, for coming out. He was involved in a buffalo harvest, right? To be able to understand and to connect with what that actually means to our fishers and ricers and buffalo harvesters across the board. Like, what is that? What is that stuff we talk about? And we're inviting to that.
I think my call to action is basically look at yourself and your wealth and your health. What does that look like? What does your consumption look like? And how can you change that? By interacting with the community that you're serving, understanding the farms, understanding the farmers, the persons that provide the food, the registered dietitians, the food banks, the food systems in that area, and being able to promote that type of healthy intake. And that goes with what you see, what you hear, and what you speak to about as well. So I feel like, how are you watering those seeds for those that aren't agriculturalists? How are you watering your seeds to be able to have that type of growth and growth towards humanity? And for me, that's our main focus. That's our main goal, is to bring humanity back, using the farm to be able to promote that, using what we consume. So, and thank you.
Well, thank you to all three of you for being here today, sharing all of your experiences and insights. I know I've learned a lot, and so big round of applause for our panel, please.
Yes, thank you so much to our panel for sharing all of that information. I think we've been inspired, and it'd be great to get some of our youth to come talk about some of this if we're able to do this next year. I know we had an elder over here who had a question, so if some of our panelists maybe could go see Mr. Eagle Shield over here and visit with him and maybe answer his question. And I apologize that they weren't able to get to you at this time, but we'll make sure that we'll get your question answered. At this time, we're going to move into our next panel, which is Traditional Practices and Native Veteran Healing. This panel will focus on how traditional practices support the healing of our vets, and it will be moderated by the Vice President of the Valdez Native Tribe, Mr. Bill Smith. He will have a discussion with our panelists, which include Mr. Ivan Sam, Mr. Joel Zaniga, and Mr. Buck Richardson. Let's all please give them a warm round of applause.
Hawata, thank you for being here with us today. Today we're going to be talking about traditional healing or practices for Native veterans. And just a little insight, the data shows that Alaska Natives and American Indians serve in our country at the highest rate per capita than any other ethnic group. And over 334,000 veterans identify as Alaska Natives and American Indians. At this time, I'd like to have my panel introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about yourselves. Sam?
Yes. Yeah, my name is Ivan Sam. I'm a U.S. Navy veteran. I served 2 tours during the Gulf War. I am coming from the Navajo Nation, Navajo tribal member. Yat Eshe Ivan Sam and Chiakiani and Sloan Twohidlini Bushchin. Kabahan Dasha Chedo, my Deshkizi Dashanella, without the Nansla, lay Tenesh Chidat Nashatlo. So I just want to introduce myself in Navajo. I know I see some relatives out there. Maybe I might be of relation to you all. So just want to put it out there. And then I also serve on the VA Tribal Advisory Committee team under the Secretary of the VA program. I serve as a art therapist and suicide prevention, substance abuse prevention counselor as well within the Veterans Art Project. Yeah, thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Joel Zuniga, a Paiute member of the Reno Sparks Indian Colony and Program Director of Native Pathways. Prior to getting into that space, I was in federal and state law enforcement for about 19 years. So I appreciate you guys joining us today.
Yeah, my name is Buck Richardson. I'm the Minority Vet Program Coordinator for Rocky Mountain Healthcare Network. Raised in the military. I was actually born in Air Force Hospital. Turned 17. I went into the Marine Corps. I was 3rd Marine Division. Our oldest boy, he's also a Marine. And my oldest boy's daughter, she is a Marine. He did 3 tours in Iraq, and she did 2 tours in Iraq. And I'm also adopted into the Blackfeet Nation. My Blackfeet name is Okakai. I work with the Minority Outreach Program for Rocky Mountain Healthcare Network, and we work across all diversities. And right now, we're doing a lot of work with the Traditional Healing Cultural Diversity Program, and have been doing that since 2001, working with not only tribal health programs, but IHS and the Veterans Administration, not only in Visit 19, but across the U.S.
Luishu, thank you, Buck. And Luishu, Atukte, Chief Bill Dahantu. And my name is Chief Bill. I am of the Dahantu people, the Yak people of Alaska, and I'm a Vietnam vet. I'm also a TVR. I'm the president or chairman of the National Health Board, chairman of the Alaska Native Health Board, and I do sit on the Veterans Group. And I want to tell you a little bit about the TVRs, the Tribal Veterans Representative. This little gentleman on the end here, I met him when I first decided to look into the Veterans Group. And they were teaching us how to be TVRs, how we can take our brothers and sisters and bring them back to the VA, because this is a whole different VA than we did when I come home in 1977. But talking with it, and Buck was there, and he says, you know, one of you in this group's going to go home. You're going to sleep for just a few hours. And you're going to have a flashback. And shit, I didn't know what he was talking about. And he said, I'll tell you who it is in the morning. Well, next morning, Buck said, it was you. And I said, yeah. I was looking for my brother. He was running through the jungle, and I couldn't find him. But that was then, and this is now. And I say that because there is better ways to serve our veterans, to not cure us, but be able to heal us, to be able to live what we have seen and done for this country. And I tell everyone, you know, I can tell you all the war stories because they come up and say, hey, what happened? What you do? How many people you kill? I said, I'll tell you the stories about the good times and the bad times, and I'll tell you the whole book if I want to write one. But there is only one chapter. That is between me and my Creator. And I've noticed some of our Native groups give our warriors, our men and women, our boys and girls, their warrior's name, so that they can keep with them and the Creator. Sorry about that, folks. Sometimes I do slip back. So I want to ask the first question, my friend Buck here. What traditional healing practices does the VA offer, and what feedback have you received from the veterans?
So we started back in 2006 in Montana. We started doing traditional healing services, and what we did is we reached out to elders and asked them what services we could do at Montana. And we started doing sweat lodges, started doing talking circles, we started doing smudges, and we increased it to do end-of-life ceremonies. And the part that I have a hard time with my job, and I have to go back a little bit, and with Chief Bill, I started with a TBR program back in 2001, and we went to a meeting in Great Falls, Montana, and it was, some of you may know him, James Floyd and I were at a meeting in 2001 in Great Falls, Montana. The General Gene Pendergrass called the meeting. There were 155 Native vets that were there, and there were 2 VA employees, myself and James Floyd. And we had a meeting, and the meeting got pretty hectic and got pretty rambunctious. And a lot of times I have to stop and think so I don't let my Marine Corps mouth open up. But at noon, all the vets went one way, and they wouldn't even go to chow with us. So we went, we came back, and James and I moved the tables, and we pushed it back against the wall, and we took 2 chairs, and we set them in the middle of the floor. And the vets that were there took bets that we wouldn't even come back. And they were surprised that we did show up. Well, then they took another set of bets that we would not come back the next day. So we came back, and after that meeting, we went to all the tribal councils in Wyoming and in Montana, and we told them what we would want to do and why we wanted to do it. And that was so that we could reach out to the veterans, and at that time, it was just veterans, which I should have known better because, like mentioned a minute ago, I was born in an Air Force hospital, Turner Air Force Base, Georgia. And every time my old man would get a rank, my mother got a certificate showing that she got the same rank. Well, it took about 3 years before I realized that we were talking about just the veterans. We weren't paying attention to the families. So it's always when I do the presentations, Amy Claridge, who's back here at the table, excuse me, we always say veterans and family, because everything that the veteran goes through, the family goes through. And it's the family that supports that veteran of what they're going through. And it's the family that helps the veteran get through that and what they're going through, and then they're supporting them when they come back. My wife made a comment at the first tour that our boy went through Iraq, and she said, I just want Jay to come back as Jay. And I told her, I said, Jay will not come back. Because once he gets over there and the bullets start flying, Jay's gone. it'll be a different Jay when he comes back. So a lot of people don't realize that it takes a different person and it takes ceremony once they come back to be able to bring back what they leave behind, and a ceremony they have to go through to be able to get back what they left over there. So when we had that meeting and we started the TVR, the Tribal Veterans Representative Program, in 2001, we went to the councils and told them what we wanted to do, and then we started saying, okay, we need to work with the families also. As part of that, we ended up saying we want to do traditional healing, cultural diversity training, ceremonies at Fort Harrison, Montana. After we did that, August of this year, we changed that so it wasn't just Montana. We expanded it to all the facilities in Visit 19 or Rocky Mountain Healthcare Network, so that we now have, if we had a slideshow we could show you, we have sweat lodges, medicine wheels, teepees that we do talking circles in, and we do smudging. We have the sweat lodge, teepee, and medicine wheel at, help me, Joel, because Joel's actually the one that's got the contract now. And that's what I started a minute ago. I don't like the terminology, but that's where I have a problem because of the ceremonial side and the government side. We had to do a contract, but we have them at Montana, which is Fort Harrison, Sheridan, which is Wyoming, Salt Lake City. We just put a brand new teepee up and a sweat lodge up. In Denver, everybody always told me, you'll never get a sweat lodge in Denver. And I said, yeah, watch. But right off of 225 at the great big brand new hospital in Denver, we just put a sweat lodge up in Denver. In fact, we ran a sweat there yesterday. While we were here, we were working with one of the guys that works with Joel, and we ran a sweat there yesterday, right there in the middle of the brand new VA hospital in Denver. And we're working on all the other facilities in Visit 19 to get sweat lodges and teepees put up so that we can run talking circles for veterans and employees. The other things that we're working on is traditional healing, cultural diversity training for employees, so that employees understand what veterans are going through when they come into the hospitals and when they're coming in from the traditional communities and having to come into the VA hospital, so they better understand what they're doing or what they're going through when they come in. One of the things that we're also doing is working on getting clinics in the communities. We just opened up one, been working on it for 2 years now. We just opened up a VA CBOC at Browning at New Eagle Shield Clinic today. It just opened up at 9 o'clock this morning. And we've been working on that for 2 years. There's now a VA clinic at Browning on the Blackfeet Nation that opened up this morning. So we're trying to expand the care, not only traditional care, but the traditional healing, to expand that care for veterans with sweat lodges, talking circles, the smudging, end-of-life ceremonies. The contract itself is 47 pages long, so there's all different types of ceremonies that are available to be able to help veterans and their families.
Thank you, Buck. Joel, could you tell us about your experience using traditional healing and the benefits of the individual, the families, and or communities, also our veterans?
Yeah, thank you. So I think the last 2 days we've kind of underscored like the transformative power and nature of traditional healing services and ceremonies. So I think as of late, even going to some of these VA centers, we've been dealing with some of our Native vets who are in some of these substance abuse programs. And one of the common themes we continuously hear is, these traditional healing services allows us to kind of commit ourselves to a cause greater than ourselves. And for them, I think it's, of course, that cause can just be simply their sobriety, right? So we start there. And then there's this renewed commitment to oftentimes what you see as one's family and then one's tribe. So these things are happening in the kind of the vessel to kind of get them there at times is these ceremonies, these traditional healing services. So for us, starting there, getting them to kind of recognize that that there's this new purpose that encompasses their life, even outside of, at times, they feel like it can be a bit linear in their treatment program in terms of the clinical side of things, because the emphasis is always just on oneself. So I think they need this kind of break almost from the fact that there is, you know, your kids, your family, your tribes, your people do need you. And I think there's no better way to kind of, I mean, ceremonies, I think, that conduit for that. I've even seen in my prior, you know, experience in law enforcement, tribes that tried to implement some of these, you know, more traditional kind of cultural relevant services into their tribal court systems. These restorative justice kind of programs, even within their clinics, we heard about today in terms of reconnecting with some of our, you know, indigenous, you know, food pathways. Even in our social services, I feel like, yes, what we're doing now is kind of meant to help, you know, the vets, but it's a multi-dimensional kind of approach, I think, to care, which yeah, we're super excited to kind of be behind.
Oh, Atta, thank you very much. Sam, please tell us about your experience using traditional healing and the benefits of the individuals, families, the communities, and once again, our veterans.
Yes. So I'm going to share with you guys a little bit of my past history, my story of my life, where I've gone and, you know, where I ended up today, where I'm at right now. So when I joined the military, I was really active in sports. I was an all-season athlete, you know, in high school, you know, very competitive. You know, I through that process, you know, I had scholarship offers, you know, in basketball, and, you know, during that process, I injured myself, so never really got the opportunity to play basketball through college. So, you know, I ended up seeking the military during my recovery when I had a torn Achilles tendon. But through my recovery, healing, I was, you know, working in Albuquerque, New Mexico, milk factory called Borden Dairies. Every day I was going through a freezer. Every time I would get out of work, it was during summertime, so it was 100+ degrees, you know, going from a freezing temperature, going out to a very extreme hot temperature, you know, consistently. And one day I was walking by the recruiting station, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to take this chance to try to join the Marine Corps. Marine Corps, I have a family history of Marine Corps, a lot of relatives. You know, my great-grandfather was a Navajo code talker. You know, a lot of uncles and brothers that served in the military as well. So, you know, the Marine they wouldn't allow me to work on aircrafts. That's what I really wanted to do. So I went to the Army, and they told me, you have to go into infantry first, you know. Try to do 2 years, and then strike for being an aviation electrician. You know, I was like, nah, that's too much for me. You know, I want to do something I enjoy doing, you know. But I ended up going to the Navy, and Navy said, take a test. Let's see where you fall in. So I took the test, and that's how I got into U.S. Navy. I was able to work on aircrafts. I did what I loved. You know, through that process, I was deployed 2 times during the Gulf War. And during wartime, you know, we were working 16, 18-hour days, launching off aircrafts, fully loaded, you know, wartime. And you would see these aircrafts come back empty, you know, all their ammunition gone. They would be reloaded again, and they would take off again. Same aircrafts flying at least 4 times throughout that day. You know, repetitiously, we probably go over like 50 flights on the flight deck. So, you know, that trauma, you know, every day consistently going through that process. And then we were also invited to go into debriefing, and there was times where we would watch on camera what these aircrafts were hitting. You know, the people involved, and, The trauma that goes along with that, we also went and detached into these other countries where there was a lot of death too. There was a lot of people that died in these places, and we walk amongst those grounds where these people have died. And then there's some service members that you see that are soiled, they got blood on them from their own comrades, and they still wear that uniform every day to work, still touching those bodily fluids, every day. Seeing that trauma like that, it takes you to another place. When I first deployed, I left as an innocent person. My spirit was innocent. I was full of laughter, joy. I was funny. My friends always wanted to be around me a lot. But when I came back, that totally changed. When you see the reality of what's going on out there on this other side of the world, it changes a lot in many perspectives. What you thought was fun and cool and traveling is not really what it is. When you see a lot of trauma out there in the world, especially third world countries, how they're being treated, how people are trying to survive out there, it changes your life. It changes who you are as a human being. So in that way, my spirit was affected in that way where the innocence was taken away. I came back, I was frustrated, anxious, always snapping. And after my second deployment, my wife kept telling me, you're so snappy, you're always, anxious. You're always mad or disappointed. She never understood, that process, what I was going through. But at the same time, I was in denial. I was in denial that I was suffering from PTSD. I tried to use alcoholism to mask my problems, And then with my injuries, they prescribe pain medication. So, that mixture of pain medication and alcoholism, it's not a good thing, It's not a good thing. But, going through that process, I started having nightmares too. So mostly every night I was going through this experience of reliving the nightmares. In my dream, I felt like there was this black demon that was haunting me. And then in my dream, we were in this hogan, this Navajo home, where I was inside. My family was huddled up in there, and they were all against the wall hiding, like there's a spirit out there hitting the home. And then my grandfather in my dream told me, you're the only person that can go out there and fix it, he says. Because, you brought that spirit home. And, in my dream, he gave me this obsidian knife, and he says, you need to go out there and take care of it. And this long, long obsidian knife, I walked out there, and the door shut. It was nighttime. The spirit was flying around everywhere. It kept hitting my body. And I'm just swinging this knife left and right in my dream. And I hit it. I hit that spirit. And I killed it. And then from there, that spirit, I was so proud that I killed the spirit, full of pride. I went back to the hogan. I tried to force myself to get in. Hey, let me in. It's me. I killed the spirit. Nobody wouldn't let me in. The door was shut. And I forced myself through the door. My family was all huddled against the wall inside the hogan. And I said, it's me, I killed the spirit. And they were afraid. And they weren't talking to me. They were just looking at me with big, eyes. They were afraid. And then I looked at my hands. My hands were black on both sides. And I was carrying this obsidian knife. So what I just killed out there is what I became after I killed it. And then I woke up, and my wife was trying to wake me up at the same time. And I ended up grabbing her. And she's like, this is the last time I'm going to do this with you. If you don't fix yourself, if you don't go out and get help, she's like, I'm going to leave. And I was at a point where I was going to lose my family. So I had to take that, admit to myself that I had a problem, So going through that process, I ended up reaching out to my grandfather. He told me the only way you can fix that is, you got to have ceremony done. And, I ended up going home and, going through the process of diagnosis is what we call it in the Navajo way, where you have to have, someone do like a crystal gazing or hand trembling, to diagnose what your problems are, and come to find out I needed to have an enemy way ceremony through that process. Enemy way ceremony, is a way of bringing balance back into your life, backtracking where all the problems started, all these prayers and songs that they sing, is a way of, going back and fixing that problem that you're going through. So the way I was told, the way it was interpreted to me was wherever I traveled, there was a lot of death out there. There's a lot of spirits, that are unresting out there. Some young people died out there that it wasn't their time. And I was told that I was walking amongst these spirits that were unresting. And those spirits are the ones that followed me back home. And that's where I exposed my family, So through that process, we don't understand that, when our soldiers, our veterans, come home from service, when they return from home, there's no decompression in between. When they come home, they're exposed to their family members, their relatives, their children. And then you got these children that, admire the uniform. They want to don your uniform that you wore, the uniform that has the soil of your brothers and sisters that have their blood, or your comrades that passed on, might have had their fingerprint oils on them, And you expose your children to that when you come home, your family members, and then that trauma itself, it jumps onto your family like that through that process. So, that's the way it was interpreted to me from the medicine man. And he goes, we're going to have to go back and fix it. We're going to have to take care of that enemy, and in our ways, we have to bring back something that has bodily oils or hair or something of the enemy to bring back home in order to take care of a ceremony. Through that process, I had money, foreign money. And the medicine man says, we can use that money because that money has their fingerprint oils all over it. So we can use that, to take care of that enemy, to bring that balance back into your life. So through that process, I was able to go through enemy way ceremony, and the way that ceremony works, it backtracks, where the problem started, but at the same time, you're also given a new name, being identified who you are on Mother Earth, because you're a child of Mother Earth, Father Sky, Mother Earth, you're right in between. So when that name is given to you, you're known for that person from there on. So I went through that process of my healing. And then, when I came home after, my healing, I was able to learn how to cope, through the struggles with PTSD and, the problems that I've been going through. I really got involved in ceremony. I really got involved with holistic healing. And then through that process, art has become a big influence for me, because when your spirit is enhanced at such a high level where you feel so good and you feel well, everything is good, you want to bring that gratitude back. You want to give that generosity back, So through that process, I was able to learn the art of working with, our ceremonial ways, beadwork, wood carving. I was able to create my own instruments, through the Native American church. And then, learning how to, create robes for roadmen. I was doing ribbon work and a lot of those good things. I was able to find my place back into this healing process. And then through my process of healing, I was also losing brothers and sisters from suicide. People that have served in the military, people that, have served their time, to lay their life on the line for us to have freedom, they came home sick too, and some of them didn't make it. Even though they came home, they didn't have a place to be at peace. Nobody understands their process. Nobody understands the sickness that they go through. That's why we have a lot of high numbers of veterans that are out there that are homeless because they can't find that healing. They don't know how to find that place of peace. So, that PTSD is real. Mental health programs. To this day, this is where I'm at. This is where I become an advocate for veterans. I became a substance abuse counselor, suicide prevention counselor, being an advocate for, veterans on the Tribal Advisory Committee team. Through that process, this is the line of work that I do right now. And to this day, I'm proud to say that, I'm able to serve my veterans like that, my fellow veterans, to make my testimony a healing process for them too. So being a consultant with VA and SAMHSA, on the suicide prevention program, we do a lot of work there too. And I'm going to share a little bit more on the next session, but, I just want to put that out there and, give you guys my perspective of where I come from as a veteran and, how traditional medicine has brought me back to this place of healing and also, bringing back that generosity back to our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. I'd like to do a shout out to Clay Ward and to True Blood and Victoria, the VA, Rural Health. There was no room up here on the board for us to have them up here, but they're sitting in the back of the room still listening because, as veterans, we walk in two worlds. I didn't realize that when I actually had to sober up my dad in 1969 to have him sign the papers because my mother wouldn't, to join the military. Well, I signed all the papers. When you join the military, you got all kinds of papers. You don't know what you're signing. But, oh, by the way, back then, I chose to be a mechanic. So I volunteered to go when everyone was being drafted. And at 17, I joined and signed the papers, went to basic for 8 weeks, Hell Week. In that same time, that same dad that I sobered up to get me to join the military passed away. I joined at boot camp on November 7th, 21st, he passed away. And we got time from basic to go bury him. Then I moved on with life. And I thought, well, what was Dad? My dad was a World War II Navy veteran. And it wasn't until I actually researched his health records, his military records, to see where he was and what it was. They called it shell shock back then days. It's the same thing, post-traumatic stress disorder. When I met Buck, he says, why don't you call it fear of military forces, hostile military forces? Because I didn't think that, oh, I've got PSD, I'm weak, I'm a coward. I'm not. I was just me. But anyway, I went to Germany for my first time, and I thought, this Army's great. I'm working on M110, 8-inch self-propelled guns. It's great. And I said, well, Vietnam's still going on. My brother just got back alive. So I did what they call the 1049, that's volunteered for Nam. And I got it. And when I got in the replacement station, shit got real. Especially when they said, sit down, sign your will, sign your insurance paper over to the beneficiary. And I said, shit, this is getting real. What's going to happen? Well, when I joined, just like every other military person joined, you sign on that bottom line that the VA, that they will take care of you. That they will take care of you after you come home. And you said, up to giving my life. And in my era, there was over 58,000 brothers and sisters that gave their life. I haven't counted Iraq, Afghanistan, and Korea and World War II. I just know my brothers and sisters from Vietnam, because I'm still back there sometimes. But it got real. And then I went on, and it took me 35 years to put in for my benefits, because I come home with 2 legs, 2 arms, everything. But 4 divorces, an alcohol class, and be sent to your neighbor's class by your company that believed in you. There was something wrong, and I was still that 19-year-old kid calling out for help. And that's what it's like. So we got our VA folks here. We got our in-health service here. I got 2 great friends. One's my sister, Rosalind, and the other one is Dennis. And you know what? We signed the MOU between the VA and the in-health service, where nobody thought the 2 federal agencies could work together. And after we signed it, I got a call and says, what do you think about putting traditional medicine, traditional healing into that MOU? And she said, well, think about it. I said, I don't have to think about it. It's one of the greatest things. Now we just got to get it to work together. So I hope before this administration is gone, that we can figure out a way, and with enough data that we have collected over this few days, shows that traditional healing and traditional medicine can heal, and especially can heal as our veterans, our brothers and sisters. And before I do some closing comments, I'd like to ask if there's anything else any one of you would like to say to the group, or is there any questions from the audience that would like to have a question answered?
I want to add one that I thought about a second ago. I think a lot of times I get kind of quiet when I think about this one. I didn't even talk to Joel about this. Amy met him. He's my nephew. He's a Marine. He's triple amputee from Fallujah. The day he got hit, I came and seen him twice here in Walter Reed. He went through, their unit went out, and his doc in Marines is the Navy corpsman that goes with you. We always say that's the best part of the Navy, because they're the ones that keep us in one piece. And they went out, and he'd got hit a couple days prior, and they lost their doc right there. And so they were going back out, and when they went by there, they'd lost their doc at that spot, and they went out, and they came back by, and his name is Tommy Parker, and Tommy looked at the spot, and when he came back by, Tommy got hit the same spot. He said he went up in the air, and he looked up, and he looked down, and he said, F, this is going to hurt. And he hit the ground, and one leg was gone, another leg was hanging off, and his left arm was hanging partly off. And he got back and got here, and they called Fort Harrison. And he was already getting everything together for his transfer to Fort Harrison when he got out of Walter Reed, by the time he even got back to Walter Reed, so that his care was going to be a seamless transition back to Montana, where he's from. He's from Flathead Nation. And he was sitting there, and Tommy went, like so many other, especially Marines do, just go on this wild streak. And he was crazy when he came back. He used to do outreaches to schools. He was always sitting up. He was sitting on a pistol, and he was going into schools doing outreaches to the schools. And I told him, I said, Tommy, I said, you can't be doing that. And he said, Uncle, he said, F yourself. He said, I don't go anywhere without my pistol. I said, Tommy, you cannot go into the schools with a pistol. He said, I don't go anywhere without my pistol. He said, they tried to kill me once, they're not going to do it again. So he was in Fort Harrison. He was going through PTSD and substance abuse treatment program. And in fact, what is today, Wednesday? Yeah, they're doing a sweat whenever Mountain Time catches up with us We're doing a sweat at Fort Harrison today. Tommy was going through the sweat over there, and they said, well, we can't get him in the sweat lodge because he's an amputee. And I said, yeah, we can. They said, how? I said, I called over to the fire department, and I said, bring me 6 blankets and 6 sheets. And they said, what are you going to do with that? And I said, we're going to make a litter out of it. And so we're going to get him in that sweat lodge. So they came over there, and Tommy came over there on his wheelchair, and he hopped down out of his chair. We put him in the blankets and those bed sheets. We drug him into the sweat lodge. And he came back out, and he was just bawling when he came out of that sweat lodge. And Tommy had been on every kind of street drug you could imagine, heroin, coke, the whole bit. And when he came out of the lodge that day, he looked at me and he said, Uncle, you just saved my life. And I said, how? He said, by getting me in that sweat lodge. I said, Tommy, I said, you saved your own life because you decided to go into that sweat lodge. He said, I can't do that coke and the heroin anymore. And he went to a 1-year-long treatment facility in Texas, and he came off the dope. And to this day, Tommy is, and Amy may remember the name of it, but he's running a veterans nonprofit support group to help other veterans to try to save them when they're coming back from PTSD. But that sweat lodge is what saved my nephew. He's a triple amputee. But it made me think when Sam was talking, when I came back from the Corps, not the brother underneath me, but the next one down, he's the Air Force AP, he was a dog handler. And his wife, she wouldn't even come near me. She said I was too intense and I scared her because I just had this about me. I just wanted to fight everybody. And what I did was I rodeoed. I rode bulls and I rode barebacks. And that's how I tried to get rid of my intensity. I just had to find something to fight all the time. And what I fought was the bulls and alcohol and speed. I hardly slept. I slept 2.5 to 3 hours a day. That's all I did was just speed, 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 and find those bulls. Because that's what I did to be able to get along with everything around me, to try to get that adrenaline, because I just couldn't find a replacement for what I had been doing. And a man, his name was Greg, and they called him Tree Burham. He was SEAL Team 2 underwater demolition expert. He was the SEAL team, Vet Center team leader. He got in my face. He's about 6'7". He looked down at me and he said, why are you trying to kill yourself? Of course, I said a couple of choice words that I can't say here. And I stomped off out of there, and I got up on top of the mountain outside of Missoula, Montana, is Mount Sentinel. And I said, now I got to go back and tell the guy he's right. I quit drinking, I quit doing speed, and I quit rodeoing. And I said, now I got to make a real honest to goodness living. And I started working with veterans then. But that's what took to get me to turn around and find something else. So what did I do? I became a workaholic. And then my wife said, now what are you going to do? So now I just work full time. But anyway, it's Marines always, I can't say always, just about always are hooked on something that they just don't stop. They're always trying to do something, usually to the extreme. My boy's that way, my granddaughter's that way. They're both always running full steam all the time.
Thank you, Buck. Anyone else, or what's our time looking like?
I do have a question. So I just want to say thank you guys for your service. And my husband's a veteran as well, too. So I do have a really special heart for veterans. My question is that I'm a member of the Navajo Nation. And Ivan, I think this question is probably for you because there are a lot of veterans, that are Navajos, and they can't afford the enemy way. And I know that the policy just went through to pay for services for traditional medicine people to perform those types of ceremonies. And I'm just wondering how that's going to, what that's going to look like, and how are veterans going to seek that help? It's not an easy feat to do an enemy way when your family shuns you because of your alcoholism, because of your addiction, because of your PTSD. I mean, I know that cycle because my husband went through that cycle. So a lot of times, veterans are just kind of shunned away for that reason. So there's not that support. And I want to know, how could we give them that support? How can we pay for their enemy way ceremony? How can we pay for a diagnosis? They need that.
I think the most important thing is, finding a place to pray first, to take care of prayer, taking that extra step to try to help yourself through that process. But we also had advocates too. Like, I want to bring up Roland here, Roland Begay. He's also a advocate there that can probably elaborate a little bit more, maybe help you out in that process, because he works on the Navajo Nation, for Native Healing Ways. Maybe he could guide you in that right direction through that process of finding a way to go about that. But I know in the past, the VA, the Navajo Nation VA, used to have a program that used to cover that ceremony too. I don't know how that program is right now, but maybe you can reach out to the Navajo Nation VA too to try to get some insight on that. Right now, there's a few medicine men, like Avery Denny is also talking about, trying to bring programs together to try to help the Navajo Nation veteran programs too. So, creating that coalition to help our veterans through that process is the most important thing right now, because we have the highest rate of suicide within the tribal veteran community than any other veteran groups. We're up there, and the numbers are rising, and we're going to do a little presentation on suicide prevention later on after this session. But there is a call to action that we're trying to make, to work on that as well. And, hopefully, Roland or Avery can help you out through that process to try to get that support for you from the Navajo Nation.
Thank you. That's one more thing with great data. It's just not the veteran that goes to war. It's the families that go to war. And it's the families that suffer right along with the veteran.
Okay, Roland's raising his hand. I think you have a mic up there, Roland.
Okay. Then my name is Roland. I am a practitioner, a medicine man, and some of the topic that Sam talked about. And I do Naja. I've been initiated and ordained in that ceremony for the past 12 years. There's also a shorter version where they tie drum and do the whole process instead of doing the 5 days ceremony. So there's a shorter version that they do. And then there's a lot of, I think a lot of it is in the family structure. If it's promoted and if it's supported, then that's how a lot of things get done. But if you're out there alone, yeah, I understand, what you guys are all going through. I have nieces and nephews that are out there going on some on 20 years, but that's how I support them. They come, I pray, and send them back out there. So I think it's what you do and what you've done. I'm came to support, but just understand that no matter what it is, the most powerful thing that you possess is your mind. And if it can be purified, then you can stand back up on your own pretty much. Getting out of balance and back in harmony is one area. If we can beautify that mind and purify it, the mind can take you so far, can take you around the world so many times. But believing in yourself and putting time and effort into it, then we should also be excited about the outcomes of it. And also, what we're exposed to, the tip of one finger to the other, right here is where everything is. And then a lot of times, just like the presentation before us, where they're saying that food is medicine, and that's where a lot of the healing lies. It's what we eat, it's what we swallow. That's the only place we can find strength. even in our ceremonies, even what we administer. A lot of these things that we do, but with working for Chin Lee Hospital for the past 11 years, we do diagnosis. All we need is your chart number to perform some of these diagnoses. We do stargazing, we do hand trembling. And I think most of the IHS on the reservation, have these people that are employed that can help you. And then a lot of time we don't charge anything. And that's why we're looking forward to this, so we can also generate revenue. But what we're talking about now is pretty much just in the IHS setting. And later on, because of the demonstration, we might go further on the outside. But on the outside, we do have outside activity forum where we perform a lot of these ceremonies on the outside after tour of duty.
Thank you. And I want to check with Devlin, what kind of time we got? Devlin, time we got? 5 minutes. 4 minutes? Once I'm speaking again, you lose minutes. But I want to say also, in the back of the room is rural health, because a lot of us on Navajo lands, Alaska, a lot of our places over there, rural health needs to come out and help the veterans as much as they can, right along with our medicine men. So, got one more question out in the audience? Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, I really appreciate this the panel, but I wanted to ask, because of our experiences, our tribes having gone through genocide and centuries of colonization, and the nonstop message from every direction that we don't count, we are nothing to them, the colonizer, it's created such a gigantic problem of what psychologists term being emotionally repressed, being unable to express our feelings, being cut off like a wall regarding being able to share our feelings, to validate, to demonstrate our love for the people in our lives, our immediate family, extended family, everything, everybody. Anything that you folks could share about how you break that ice and continue that work to help people move through that, to share their hearts with people. I know that everything you've said sort of gets at that, but I was curious if you had anything else that you might share about how you might open people up towards that, to move in that way of being free and sharing their hearts, their lives, any of it.
Yeah, Sam can share, but I'll tell you one thing. I never knew about the genocides or anything else. I just knew when I joined from the military, at a kid at 17, I was going to get off the streets, and I was going to be able to eat 3 meals a day to start with. So I also knew I come from an alcoholic family, and I knew that I had to stop the deals myself. And as a veteran that comes home, that doesn't see it, you find us out in the bush, you find us out as far as we can go. You find us sitting in the room, we're against the wall, because that's where we're safe. And if you have never been in a position where it's kill or be killed, you'll never understand how a veteran feels. And I'll let Sam do it, because I just a 17-year-old kid that's still fighting the same wars. Awata, thank you.
So a lot of times in tribal communities or tribal service members, majority of them go into the service with trauma already, intergenerational trauma, historical trauma, the struggles of substance abuse and, broken families, domestic violence, these are places where a lot of service members are trying to escape their community to try to go into the military. That's from my experience too. I had to try to get out of what I was going through at the time to go into the military, because I was trying to escape that struggle too, because within my own family, there was always that substance abuse there, they were struggling with, and I needed to get out of there, because I felt like if I didn't get out, I was going to die at such an early, young age, But, when we go through that process, service members, especially tribal members, go through that process, they're still trying to heal and go through that struggle. But on top of that, there's layers of the military. Once again, there's the institutionalization, there's structure, there's military bearing, the systematic, numbers and order, is involved, with military. So when you add that on top of trauma, you're creating this layers of different struggles. But through that process, I learned, that self-reliance is such an important thing. In our language, we call it ahwejit ego deya. That's the term that the grandfathers and grandmothers used, because it's taught in that way from their elders and from our ancestors of all the genocides that we've been going through. They've gone through that struggle already. And I think the most important thing is self-reliance. Trying to find that place for yourself to help yourself. Take that extra step to try to do what you need to do to get to your destination. So through ceremony, I learned a lot of that process. So it was important that, when we teach our children these ways, we talk about food. Food is medicine, ancestral foods, even our teachings, our storytelling. There's a reason why we tell stories, so that history doesn't repeat itself, or learn something in the process. But also that ceremony, too, is there for our balance, to create that balance through our process in life.
Thank you, Sam. We got
I'm
one
gonna
more
add
for Buck, and then
one quick thing that Bill just made me think of. When we used to take, Faith talked about Black Hills, South Dakota. We used to take anywhere from 10 to 14 TVRs over there for cultural diversity training for VA employees. And when we took them, they were all combat vets, and they were all from different nations. They were all from different branches. And one thing it just made me think about was veterans all speak the same language, where non-veterans may not be able to relate to that language. But when you get to veterans, those branches each have their own language that we may cut up amongst ourselves, but we're a core group, but we each have our own language. Marines have their own language, Army has their own. But when we were in South Dakota, they always put us off by ourselves in what we call, Marine Corps calls it, in our own squad bay. And they always put all the other VA employees in all the different cabins in that, it's called the Outlaw Ranch. And they put all the vets way down there by ourselves, because we'd cut up, but we more or less ran the training for the VA employees to learn what we were there to try to teach for the cultural diversity. So that's that language that we were there to teach something. We were serious all day, but we had our own language that we were by ourselves at night. And then we would do the sweats and the talking circles. And then when it come time to retire the colors, we took the colors down and we'd raise the colors in the morning. And once we took the colors down and did talking circles, then when we do like honorings for the Wounded Warrior program, we did them all over the country, from Acadia, Maine, all the way down to San Antonio, Texas. Big Bend of Texas. Once we retired those colors for that unit, we would disappear into the dark and leave. So that unit was still there as a unit, but we were gone. So we had that language that nobody else may not understand. So we kept that unit integrity.
thank you, Buck. And just before we go, we told you some pretty good tragedies. We had some hard times speaking, but I want to leave you with this. My buddy over there was a Marine. He stated that the corpsmen are his babysitters, his nurses, his doctors. But you know what the most important job in the United States Army is? Anybody know? No, it's not the cook. We all will eat. We can eat C rations. They got everybody else. But you know what my brothers, my Marine brothers really need? They need heroes too. So Us Army guys got to live up to that. So thank you. Thank you very much, Awata.
Thank you so much to our veterans for sharing your experiences, sharing your stories, sharing so much of your personal background, and allowing us in. I think it's healing for us all. We're going to take a very quick 5-minute break as we prepare the stage for our next panel. And again, it's a great time to use the bathroom. You can go to the side of the elevators or just follow this sign here, but we're asking for you to please be back in 5 minutes.
Produced by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.